Now, U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening a 50% tariff on copper imports into the United States. Let's get more from Micheal Dobner, National Leader of Economics and Policy Practice at PwC Canada. Micheal, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So Canada, globally not a huge producer of copper, only about 2%, a bit more of world output, but a fairly significant supplier to the U.S.
Yeah, absolutely correct. We are the #2 exporter after Chile to the U.S.
And there's a wrinkle here that we supply mainly raw copper into the U.S., whereas you feel the target of the administration here may be China, which sells refined copper.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of a bigger strategy of the U.S. that is called decoupling from China, especially on strategic elements. And copper is one of those strategic elements because it's used in so many applications, including defense applications.
Do you think there could be a carve-out then for the Canadian copper industry? We would evade this tariff?
As an economist, I would say that makes a lot of sense to do that, and I hope that July 21st will give us good news in that regard. Is that going to be the rationale of this U.S. administration? I am not sure, but from an economic standpoint, it makes perfect sense because Canada will always be part of the U.S. camp, and so there is no worry about security of supply from us.
It's interesting. We've heard this in other industries, other products, that China is the real target for Trump.
Yes, I would just correct here for some of your audience. China has been the target of also the previous administration. So it's not a Democrat or Republican issue. It's just a matter of the tactics of both administrations. And Trump has a unique tactic. Let's leave it at that.
More confrontational, I think you could say. Yeah. So America brings in about half of its copper, and it doesn't have the processing capacity right now.
For the most part, it does not have the processing capacity. That is true also for Canada. A lot of our raw copper, including U.S. and Canada, goes actually to China and comes back to us.
Isn't that interesting? Why was it just cheaper to operate there?
It's much cheaper, and this is not true only for copper. It's true for many other minerals, and I think that's part of what the current government is trying to do is to bring more processing, because we realize that we depend now on China for so many processing elements, which puts us at risk from a national standpoint.
I mean, it's going to be hard, I would imagine, in getting a local approval for new smelters and refineries. They are polluting as a rule.
That is true, and that was one of the reasons it was hard to do that. Or economically, also, they are more expensive here than in China. But I think these days national security becomes more of an issue than environment. Without getting into the issue, what's more important. But that's what governments are currently focusing on.
I think this has happened in aluminum. Local governments in China have encouraged excessive aluminum capacity because they have a lot of sway over industrial investment.
Yes, that is absolutely true, although Canada is a big player in aluminum fabrication.
Yes, of course, a global player. Where do you see this going, though? Insofar, well, do you see this raising the cost of copper significantly for U.S. industry?
Yes, because if I can use an economic term, the elasticity of demand for copper is very, very low because you need it. You cannot replace it in many processes. So I expect that demand will not decline in a dramatic way, and therefore most of those tariffs will be passed on to U.S. consumers. At least in the short run, until the U.S. gets its act together as far as developing its own capacity, that will be the case.
Yeah. I mean, there's substitutability of aluminum in some applications, I guess. But
but for the most part, they will, and even substituting probably is not going to be easy and will take some time. But in the short term, I think most of those tariffs will be passed on to the U.S. consumer.
And I'm just trying, the construction costs have already soared in recent years, and it's going to add to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, inflation in the U.S., if this goes ahead and say Canada is not exempt, we can talk about 1 percentage point increase in inflation as a result.
Just from copper?
Just from copper, yeah.
Is that important?